Welcome back everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to be breaking down everything you need to know about wave control in Season 15. There are a lot of big changes this season, including the wave 4 cannon, the minions doing a lot of damage to each other, and because of this, the way you should be controlling your wave is drastically different. So I'm going to be going through all the strategies, the differences, and really just improving your knowledge of wave control overall. So if that sounds good to you, then let's get started. How's it going, team? Now, real quick before we start the video, I have a pretty exciting announcement in regards to the coaching program. Alois has joined on as a full-time coach. So if you want the option to be coached by me and him personally week by week and really lock in and improve those fundamentals, the link will be in the description. Would love to see you there, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, we're going to be starting with the first 4 waves. So I'm going to be going through a bunch of different options that you have and when to use each one, and then showcasing some examples at the end. So starting with the 2-wave crash. So in the previous season, the 3-wave crash was the standard. You wanted to crash the cannon, let the wave come back into you, and look for an all-in or just base after the cannon. But now, due to the minions doing so much damage to each other, if you are trading against your opponent, you're most likely not going to be able to crash wave 3. So it's best to go for a 2-wave crash in a lot of situations. So I'll go through 3-wave crash after, but for a 2-wave crash, if you are trading onto your opponent, so if you take a level 1 trade, you're getting prio, you get level 2 on the 7th minion, look for that all-in, you should go for a 2-wave crash. Now, it's really important that you try to crash wave 2 as quickly as you can. Don't give up trading for it. If they're walking up, of course, beat them up. Prioritize the trade over the wave 2. But if they're sitting 2 screens away, especially those Mundo and Nasus players just doing nothing, then you should just 2-wave crash very quickly. Because the faster you crash wave 2, the faster the next wave is going to come back to you. Where if you crash it slowly, wave 3 might be just outside of tower, or they might even block wave 2 and just block it from crashing entirely. So make sure if you are wave 2 crashing, you get that wave in ASAP unless you have a better thing to do, like a big trade. Now, after you've crashed wave 2, that's when you're going to be going to ward. You can level 1 ward in times where you're going to be playing super aggressive level 1, so think Olaf versus Darius type of thing, level 1 fight to the death. You could technically get level 2 ganks, so you can ward level 1 in that timer, but now because you're not 3-wave crashing very often, if you crash wave 2, you have a lot of time to ward before the enemy jungler finishes their 3-camp gank. So that's going to keep your ward there long enough for them to spot them if they do a full clear gank as well. So it's definitely going to be more of an efficient ward. So it's important that you ward on this timer, and now that the wave 3 is coming back towards you, that's when you have a lot of options. You can either stack wave 3 and 4 together, which is hopefully a strategy you've heard before. You crash wave 2, let wave 3 come out, you make sure you hit wave 3 a little bit, don't let it bounce back the way you would last season on wave 4. You hit it a little bit to make sure you get level 3 first. It's going to take 2 minions of wave 3 to get you level 3, so make sure you're hitting the wave as soon as it comes in. Don't one-shot it under tower. You can unless in certain scenarios, which we will cover soon, but make sure you're hitting the wave as it comes back, stacking it up with wave 4, and then crashing that as a whole. That's going to be very similar to a wave 3 crash last season. So after you crash wave 4, you can look to proxy, you can invade the jungle, you can cheat a recall after wave 4 and come back to lane. You have a lot of options to play that out. And now the next 2 waves that are coming, wave 5 and 6, are going to be regular waves, so it's a lot easier for you to let the wave come back in towards you and trim and freeze it, compared to if they had a cannon minion coming towards you. So now, if you want a wave 3 crash consistently, it's going to be mainly a wave 2 crash and a wave 4 crash, and then do what you'd normally do on the previous season. Now, the main timers where you want to look for a 2-wave crash is going to be in matchups where you're getting prio and you have options to trade onto them, especially if your opponent is not hitting the wave very much. If they hit the wave a lot, you can adapt into a 3-wave, but if you're getting prio, if you're in a matchup that's favorable for you and you're beating up your opponent, you should look for a wave 2 crash. Even one trade, I would say, depending on your champion, is going to hit the wave enough to the point where you do need a 2-wave crash. It's always better to cleanly 2-wave crash than to try to 3-wave crash when it's unrealistic and have the wave stuck in an awkward position. So make sure you catch yourself in the moment going for a 2-wave, but this is going to be your default. So if you're ever unsure, should I 2-wave or should I adapt to a 3-wave, you should default to a 2-wave crash in this season. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to be showcasing some examples of the topics that we're talking about. So starting with the 4-wave crash. So the 2-wave crash into a 4-wave crash, and to do whatever looks best in the scenario. So in this game here, I'm playing a Rallia against a Gnar. Jungler getting killed level 1, doesn't really affect us. And now we go. So remember, it's not just playing purely for the wave control. You want to be prioritizing the trading. So in this matchup, I want to be looking to get my stacks, take a level 1 trade up against this Gnar, and abuse my level 2 as well. So exactly what I'm going to do here, get my 3 stacks, Q onto 4, and just bash him down here. Disengage here, because he had bone plating up and the wave was coming in. So now I want to be playing for my level 2. So I'm going to be waiting here for the wave to get a bit lower, get my level 2, go for the trade, and then one-shot the wave after the trade is done. If he respects the trade, I'll play purely for the wave control. So you can see I'm priming the minions so that I can do this, the triple jump, and get a stun as well, able to get a good trade. But now that the trade is done, I don't have my spells up, now I'm going to be forcing wave 2 under tower. So like we talked about, this is your timer to ward, so I go and do just that, just in case Volibear, didn't do well here, and Italy gets red buff, Raptors, stuff like that, comes top. Better for me just to leave it like this. But now you can see, because I crash wave 2 relatively cleanly, it can be faster, it can be slow, but in this position, I can hit the wave every single minion, I can trade onto him, and I can stack it with wave 4. But you can see, I'm bashing the wave down, I'm trying to get level 3 before him, or roughly the same time, not giving him that level 3 advantage. The timer there I had to respect because he had Mega Gnar, and now I go for this trade. You can see, looking to maintain trading throughout the whole time, while keeping my wave control plan in mind, 2-wave crash into a 4-wave. So now, wave 4 is coming in, I'm getting pretty low on mana, which is going to be really common for most champions like Olaf, Jax, Aurelia, champs that utilize mana. After wave 4, most of the time you're going to have to base. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. Get this wave in as fast as I can, but of course go for a trade at the same time. So you'll see, go for my W to get the minions low and bop his bone plating, get my E, and I'm able to pick up the kill. Now, if I didn't get this opportunity, if he didn't give me that window to punish him that I was looking for, and let's just say he backed away, I would have crashed this wave, I would have based, I would have TP'd back to lane, and then looked to play it out. Don't worry, I don't die to the gank, but you can see the main point, even though you should be trying to focus on and learn the new wave control, don't tunnel too hard on it. I've taught this concept before, the 2-wave into the 4-wave to my students, and they tunnel way too hard to it on the point where they're not even looking for trades anymore. Make sure you are prioritizing your trades, but trying to balance the wave control as well. Now, as for the Wave 3 crash, there are going to be games where you have to crash Wave 3, even if initially you wanted to crash Wave 2, and most likely those times is going to be when your opponent is contesting the wave. So even if you're getting pro, if your opponent's doing a lot of damage to the wave, it's really volatile, really scrappy, you're both doing damage to the wave, you might need to adapt into a Wave 3 crash in that timer and prioritize the trades instead. Now, this is going to be very likely on champions such as Camille or champions like Fiora, where your wave clear is so terrible that you might need to adapt into a Wave 3 crash if you are trading with your opponent. So on champions like that, champions that push waves very slowly, it's very important for you to build on that skill set. It's more important for you to learn that, when to crash wave 2 or wave 3 and really register it, compared to a champion like Olaf or a champion like Renekton, where you've got that get out of jail free card with your Q. You can just nuke wave 2 whenever you want, so you don't really need to know to register when to crash wave 2 or 3 as much as these bad wave clear champs. So if you like to play champs like that, it's an important skill for you to learn when wave 3 is arriving, or even when wave 2 is arriving, you need to decide, okay, I want a 2-wave crash or 3-wave crash here, because if you try to awkwardly 2-wave crash when it should have been a wave 3, your wave could get stuck in a really horrible position. Now, another time at a wave 3 crash is actually if you're dominating your opponent so hard without damaging the wave. So good examples of that coming soon, but pretty much if you're fighting them away from the wave, so if you're a strong champion like a Riven or a Darius and really beating them down, but you haven't really hit the wave that much, you can keep the wave in that position for wave 3 and just block them between the wave and their tower. Just stand there and don't let them approach the wave at all. You can keep them on 0 CS, attack them as they walk in, where if you crash wave 2 in that scenario, they can start to hit the wave, get some CS, and get level 2 themselves. So you can go through a 3-wave crash really aggressively there. The reason you don't really want to do a 2-wave crash and let wave 3 bounce back towards you like you did on previous seasons with wave 3 to 4 is because if you hit the opponent even a little bit, which you need to, then you're not going to be able to let the wave come back to you. There could be some exceptions, maybe you just hit them with a little Fiora Q and go back in the bush, you could let it come back in. But if you are trading on the majority of champions, champs like Mbessa or Darius, and you hit the wave a little bit, even if you just auto-attack them a few times, it's going to be really difficult to let the wave come back towards you. Now, the other downside to this is if your opponent hits the wave, and you're chilling and waiting for the wave to come back to you, they are going to get level 3 before you. Where if you crash wave 3 last season, you'd get level 3 before them. So now they're going to be level 3 versus 2. So if they're playing a good champion like Aurelia or Rumble, even if you do win the early game, they might all in you level 3 versus 2, and it's going to be really hard for you. Which is why you want to be hitting wave 3 as it comes in to kill the first 2 minions, get level 3 at the same time, or before them actually, and that means you're not really going to be able to let the wave come back into you if you're beating it down like that. So in that case, you just crash wave 4, and then you can decide to cheater, invade the jungle, or just stay and let the wave come back to you. However, just because letting wave 3 come back towards you is way more difficult than before, that doesn't mean you never do it. The time where you would want to let wave 3 bounce back towards you and try to trim the wave a little bit and freeze outside your tower, similar to last season, is going to be when you have an overwhelming advantage. So let's say you get your opponent down to 150 HP, 200, and they flash away level 1, go for a good all-in, then, and you crash wave 2, you're sitting there 80% HP on your strong champion like Aurelia or Darius, and they're a weakling champion, or champ that's quite weak early game, like a Malphite or something like that, then you can let wave 3 and 4 come back towards you, because they're not going to be strong enough to abuse level 3 vs 2 anyway, they're too low to touch the wave without you trading onto them, even if they do have the minion advantage. So if you're strong enough to fight them, despite the minion advantage, if they walk up and trim the wave and freeze it, you can just let wave 3 and 4 come back to you, trim and freeze. Just keep in mind that's going to be very, very rare. You need to have a massive advantage over them in terms of HP and champion power level to be able to do that. So most of the time, I wouldn't worry about this too much. Unless you are playing one of those really powerful champs, and you should just go for a 4-wave crash and hitting wave 3 as it comes in to make sure you don't give the enemy the momentum in the lane. Now, I have a couple of examples here of a 3-wave crash with different reasoning for each one. In this game, I'm playing Darius up against an Irelia. So we've both got Ignite, it's really volatile, really scrappy, and I've warded the jungle just in case to give myself another option where maybe I can 2-wave crash into attack jungle, or just keep an eye on him. But my game plan into this game was let the wave settle down, walk behind the wave level 1, and completely zone her from the wave. Now, if I do get that fight, I'm not going to be hitting the wave that much, as you'll see very shortly, which means my damage to the wave is going to be quite low. So I'm going to be opting into a 3-wave crash in this game. So you can see really hard pressuring, getting my XP, and then running at her to deny her XP and forcing this trade. So we can see trying to dodge her E, but good E by her, and just flashing onto it, making it really volatile, really messy. It's definitely worth that type of trade in a situation where your opponent doesn't have TP, as how is he ever going to get a base if he's not strong enough to get prior against me? So now, my damage to him didn't really annoy the wave at all. I barely did any damage to the wave, barely took much minion aggro, so I can actually go for a 3-wave crash in this game. However, you're going to see, despite me doing barely any damage to the wave, I didn't really get into a situation where I could keep the wave in the center. It did go near him. However, a little tip for this, for a 3-wave crash, is I'm really milking out the last hits here. So I'm not just hitting it whenever I can get the minion. You see that caster, I could get it. Now I'm waiting for it to get a bit lower. And this melee, I'm really waiting for all the minions to shoot their shot before I hit it. Because if I were to hit it straight away when it was on 83 HP, then the minions might turn to a new target and I'll push faster than I want. So really milking out the minion as much as I can without missing the last hit. And even though my melees did hit the tower, I can trade onto them and my casters are all out of here. So I can hit the majority of this wave unscathed. And I wouldn't recommend being in this situation if you didn't get a good trade, because if they're full HP, they could posture to bully me here or go for a trade, but because my level 1 trade was so good, it's a good timer to slow down my push, keep the wave here, and you can see she can't even queue in and get a single minion. So she's in a pretty bad scenario. I use my prior here. I don't really need to recall. I'm 75% HP, high mana, so I use my prior to go for a roam instead. You can see I let the wave block like this, and then I let the wave come back towards me and go for this roam. We only care about the wave control though. I don't even think I got a kill. I'm just floating around here, and I base and come back. So now with the wave coming back, the wave is in a nice freeze position, trimming it a little bit, trying to keep it around 5-6 minions. And then when she does arrive, you can see I pulled the wave up here, 5 minion gap. And when she does arrive, we can take the kill. So less about the bounce back freeze. You know, we've all done that before in previous seasons. But you can see the main point I want to showcase in this matchup is I took a really aggressive level 1 trade that didn't annoy the wave that much. So I opted from changing from a 2-wave crash into a 3-wave crash so that I could build a bigger wave. I could keep the wave there for longer and deny her even more CS. For our next example, I'm playing Camille up against an Ambessa. And again, I do a 3-wave crash, but the reasoning was different. In this game, I went for a 3-wave crash because Ambessa was making the lane volatile, hitting the wave a lot, and I'm playing Camille, a champ with terrible wave clear, so I had to 3-wave crash in this game. You can see I level 1 warded because I'm planning to play really aggressive early, so in case I get level 3 ganked, I wanted to have a ward down just for that. But most of the time, you don't really need to, especially on red side. You can just 2-wave crash into ward, but because my wave clear was so trash, I got my level 1 ward down just in case I couldn't go for a 2-wave crash. So we can see, playing really aggressive, I'm hitting the wave a lot, because initially I did want a 2-wave crash and get that wave out, but because I'm Camille, and because this Ambessa was playing relatively aggressive and spamming Qs on me in the wave, it was hard for me to do so. So I adapted and went for a 3-wave crash. You can see level 2 versus 1, the trade you want to go for every game, and I'm bashing her down. So something this Ambessa did quite well is the fact that she was hitting the wave a lot, so that she got level 2 at a similar time to me. But I still abused my level 2. She didn't respect the QE Conqueror Camille tick enough. I was able to get a good trade. But now, wave 3 is here. So I'm going to be looking, force onto have EQ, not just for the great trade, but also to get attack speed from my E, help me get this wave in faster. It's really, really hard to do a 4-wave crash in this type of position, unless they do a lot of damage to the wave. It is possible if they're hitting the wave a lot, but from this position, I knew a full wave crash is not possible. I need to get this wave in as fast as I can. So you can see I'm hitting the wave a lot. Don't want to miss minions, of course, but I'm hitting the wave pretty quickly and trying to get this wave under tower. So I went for a dive here as well, using my prio for a specific purpose. Now, the timing where you would want to do a full wave crash in the center of the lane like that is pretty much if Mbessa kept doing what she did there. If I didn't get that amazing level 2 trade and she came up and kept staunching me and kept trimming the wave, I might have to adapt into a full wave crash, especially on champions with bad wave clear like Camille. There will be times where you have to do it, but most of the time, a 2 wave crash is going to be the goal, and a 3 wave crash is going to be your adaptation. Now, as for wave 4, this is going to be your default in a game where you're getting prio. So a wave 2 crash into a wave 4 crash. After you've crashed wave 4, that's when you can look to do the new cheater recall, so wave 4 crash into base, or you can look to proxy, attack the jungle, or just stay and trim the wave. Now, when should you do each one? So you should cheater recall in a game where you need resources and the item. So don't base just for a longsword refillable after wave 4, base for resources and that longsword. So if you're half HP, down a lot of mana especially, you should look to cheater. But let's say you're playing a champion like Riven or a champion like Mbessa, and you're 80%, 90% HP, do not cheater recall. You don't need to, it's not worth the longsword. It's better for you to stay and bully your opponent down, poke them under tower, or go for an invade on the enemy jungle. Because if you do base, they're going to get the XP advantage over you. They're going to get this massive stack of minions, and when you get back to lane, it's going to be really hard for you to punish them. Now, one extra thing this season, due to giving a little bit of extra gold early game, due to the passive income, if you do get perfect CS wave 4, which we've all been doing, hopefully 25 out of 25 CS, you can actually afford 2 longswords. So before, when you wave 3 crash, one longsword refillable was the max that you could afford, and even if you proxy wave forward, you couldn't get 2 longswords, but now you can if you get perfect CS, so it's another incentive to get better at farming. Because imagine you're playing a champion that starts Doran's Blade and you come back with D-Blade double longsword and they're still on D-Shield, your power advantage is going to be absolutely crazy. So CSing value has gone up. I wouldn't worry too much about it. 25 out of 25 is pretty unrealistic if your opponent is heavy trading. But if you're versing kind of that NPC playstyle, the Gragas players, the Bundos that sit really far back and just farming with Q, you can focus more so on farming and get a stronger buy so that when the wave comes back towards you, you can punish them a lot more aggressive. Now, because I know most of you are really interested in what to do in the first 4 waves, even though we've broken it down, I am going to summarize it for you. So the summary of what to do when you're heading into your game, imagining a game where you can get prio, is go for a 2-wave crash as your default, but a clean 2-wave crash, so abuse a level 1 trade, get level 2 before them off the 7th minion, abuse that trade, and then after the trade, or if they're respecting and not allowing you to do it, then you should go for a 2-wave crash ASAP, so that wave 3 comes back away from the tower. Now, as wave 3 is coming in, it's important that you hit the wave as comes in, so ward after crashing wave 2, trim wave 3 as it comes in so that you can get level 3 before them off the first 2 minions, take a level 3 vs 2 trade if you can, if not you can either look for a wave 4 crash, or if you do get that level 3 trade onto them, you can actually just crash wave 3 as well. That's perfectly fine. So if you got a huge trade on a champ like Renekton, your E and Q just dominated the wave, just crash wave 3. Remember, no matter what wave you're crashing, crash that wave cleanly. It doesn't matter if it's wave 3 or wave 2, as long as you crash it cleanly, your options are going to be very open. So go for that level 3 trade, and if you have to crash wave 3, that's fine. But if not, the default, if they're respecting, if they know about level up timers, you're going to be stacking wave 3 and 4 together, crashing that, and then it's going to be very similar to what you're used to. You can base, you can proxy, attack the jungle, poke under tower, and now wave 5 and 6 are going to come back towards you. Now, one thing that we didn't mention, keep in mind that if you do fight them too much, when wave 5 is coming back, you're going to break your bounce back straight away, as the minions do too much damage to each other. So you do have to be a little bit careful, so just make sure you're gentle as wave 5 and 6 comes in, if you do want to freeze outside your tower and go for the all-in that you're used to from last season. Moving on to the bounce back. Now, a lot of you have probably realized this season, it's a lot harder to let the wave come back towards you if you want to trade onto your opponent while it's coming back. Which is why it is quite important that you take your trades as you're pushing back towards them, so that when the wave is coming back, you don't have to do anything that can ruin the integrity of your wave. So this also means crashing your wave is very important. Because the minions do so much damage to each other, if you don't cleanly crash your wave, you're going to have a problem. So for those of you who don't know, I'd say it's about a year and a half back, they made a change to nerf proxying and proccing demolish in front of people. They made a change where once a minion is locked onto a tower, it's not changing its mind no matter what. Doesn't matter if you all in them right next to that massive double stack cannon wave, if their wave is touching the tower, they're not going to turn on to you. So the reason this is important for the bounce back is if you don't crash cleanly, your wave is going to hit their wave even a little bit, they're going to kill the wave before they swap to tower. So let's imagine they kill 3 melee minions. Not only will you not get that, but now the wave bouncing back towards you, just 3 measly caster minions, it's going to be really hard to let it come back. Even if your wave doesn't even kill them. Let's say you almost cleanly crash your wave and it just does damage. The wave, the melee creeps being half HP or even a quarter HP, is going to make that bounce back more difficult. So you need to cleanly crash the wave before you plan to bounce back, or your bounce back will be a lot more difficult. Now, once wave 5 is coming, we touched on it a little bit, but make sure you're not taking any type of trade that will ruin the integrity of the wave, or it's going to be really hard to freeze it. So be very patient, let wave 5 and 6 come back, and you can't take little trades, especially little trades that don't annoy the wave too much, like a Fiora Q, or maybe a Gwen queue that doesn't hit too much of the wave, but you need to let the wave come back towards you. But again, if your opponent is doing a lot of damage to the wave, that allows you to do a lot more. So if your opponent's doing nothing, then don't do nothing, but be very careful to hit the wave. But if they're walking up, dumping spells onto it, you can be a lot more lenient, especially if they use a spell in front of you that hits the wave. You can use a spell on them, and even if it hits the wave, most likely it's going to be fine. Of course, there's some variables. If you send a guarantee through it, just because the Darius queued a couple melees, and you send an entire guarantee through it, kill the wave, it's not going to come back to you. But realistically, if your opponent hits the wave a lot, you can hit the wave a lot more, so feel free to trade if that's the case. But if not, if they're sitting back, that NPC playstyle we hate diverse, then let the wave come back towards you and go for your all-in when it's in that good freeze position, and so you can actually abuse the long lane. Now, as for the win, when do you want to be letting the wave bounce back towards you, or you just want to be keeping your opponent pinned under tower? And I would say in this season, it's more valuable a lot of the time to maintain prio. Not only does it allow you to trade onto them whenever you want, without caring about breaking the wave and stopping it coming back, but it also allows you to roam more. This season is so chaotic, there is so much fighting, especially in higher brackets. So if you want to be looking to freeze, it has to be on a timer where there's nothing else to do. So especially when there's no void grubs up, that can be a good timer to freeze. So after you crash wave 4 and the wave comes back to you, I would say if your jungler is pathing down, that's going to be the best time to let the wave bounce back. The reason for that, it's really hard to hit tower pre 5 minutes. There's not going to be any void grubs, of course, and that's going to match your jungler's time. But the wave is going to arrive outside your tower around 4:10, 4:30, depending on how you go, after you crash wave 4 and let it bounce back. So that's going to sync up with the time where your jungler comes back top and eats his second rotation of camps. But after that, when void grubs are up, I'll say you don't really want to be freezing. Unless your jungler is just fully committed to dragon and bottom, then you can do so. But a lot of the time, if you are planning to intentionally let the wave bounce back towards you when you have a choice, it has to be for a reason where there's nothing else to do. In my experience, it's better to maintain pro so that you can trade onto your opponent, play for dives, attack the jungler, play for plates, proxying, stuff like that, and especially playing for void grubs is going to be more valuable than the default of let wave come back in, freeze, and look to a punish. Because if you do that and your opponent just roams, attacks your jungler, or plays for grubs and you're their second, that's going to be a bigger lose condition for your team than you missing out on a freeze. So again, the best time to look for a bounce back is going to be early game after crashing wave 4, or if there's nothing up. So if you just finished the grub fight and you know your jungler's pathing down, then you can let the wave bounce back and freeze. So make sure there's nothing to do, especially void grubs, if you are planning to let that wave come back into you, or if you're trying to sync it up with your jungler's path. Now, for our example of the bounce back, I wanted to showcase this VOD here. You might remember it from before, Camille vs Mbissa. And we solo killed her level 3, but because I had to spend time to dive her instead of recalling, and my death time was a little bit longer, not really about the same, 12 seconds, but we had to spend time to dive her and then wait 12 seconds, so I still lost stuff on this bounce back. I also wanted to showcase the Camille one, because your wave clear is so terrible, you don't have that get out of jail free card to trim the wave with an AoE ability, but we can see here, I TP back straight away, and I still lost a lot of minions because I took too long to recall, wasting time diving her, but she lost it as well. It's not a big deal, but you can kind of imagine why you need to TP back to lane now, as you're going to lose so much, even though the wave was coming back towards me. If I walked there, I would have lost most of that cannon wave. So we can see the wave is coming back. I don't want to ruin the wave, which is why I'm not eating onto it now with my passive. I took a baby trade with my Q and passive, but I don't want to be making it too volatile, tanking that minion aggro. Even though I'm not going to be hitting the wave with a big AoE spell, if I beat her up and the wave hits me, that's drawing damage away from the wave. So I take a trade here, little trades with my Q, and keep in mind, she's hitting the wave as well, so that gave me an opportunity to force her. But you can see I'm fighting her away from the wave. My trade's not annoying the wave. That tower shot annoyed me at the game, but you can see the idea is sound. I'm looking to trade onto her away from the wave, or a trade that's not breaking the wave, just doing a little bit less damage than her to the wave so that it comes back towards me. And now I'm in a good position. I've got the wave frozen here. We're both level 4. The HP trades went well, so I've got her in a checkmate situation. So I'm going to look to trade onto her like this. Her spells are hitting the wave as well, so it's fine that my W does. and I'm looking to make her come into the kill zone. The kill zone by here, we can E onto her exactly where I want her, and you can see our 5 minion rule. 5 minions here, not a permanent freeze, but good enough. Good ward by her, so I couldn't juggle the minion aggro out of the bush, so I had to come back here to not take too much damage. Now, 4 minions is not a permanent freeze, but I can hold her here long enough to give her an incentive to walk up and allow me to trade onto her. So he didn't end up getting the kill. The Lee Sin's Q must have not been bound or something like that. It was a bit unlucky. But you can see the idea is locked in, letting the wave come back in, trimming the wave and trading onto them without overbreaking the wave is a skill that can be quite difficult on this season, but definitely one that you can do early game, especially after a wave 4 crash. Moving on to teleport, and we're not going to be going through a full TP guide now, that's for another time. We're mainly going to be focusing on the wave control and how TP interacts with that. Now, a big mistake I see a lot of my students making in regards to TP is they're doing it the same way they would do in the previous season, where if they crash a clean wave, they'll base and they'll walk back to lane. It might sound good to you, but the problem with that now is because the minions do so much damage to each other, if you crash a wave, even if you crash it very cleanly, you dump Renekton spells onto it and base, walk back, you're going to lose a lot. Imagine you crash the wave before cannon and base and walk back, you're going to lose almost the entire cannon wave. You lose around 4 minions, maybe 5, including that cannon minion. So it's just not worth walking back. I always recommend TPing back to lane on your first TP. So it's a really good rule to follow. It's not going to be true literally every time, but if you TP back to lane on your first TP, it's going to help you out more often than not. The exceptions to this is if you can proxy. So if you get a really clean proxy and walk back to lane, you're not going to lose anything, even if it's your first TP. You might lose 1 or 2, but you're not going to lose a cannon or you're not going to lose an entire half wave. So it's good for you to walk back to lane if you proxy because you buy yourself a lot of tempo. The other exception is if you have something else to do with your TP, or if the jungler is just sitting there waiting for you. Even in that case, I'd still TP back, to be honest. I'll TP in a safer location so you don't get ganked on spawn. But even if you walk back scared of the jungler, you're going to lose so much that when you get back to lane, you're going to be level 3 versus 4, or they're going to be level 5 versus 4 with this massive stack wave, and you're not going to have much options to do against them. And if they TP back when you don't, they're going to be up XP that entire lane. So really important that you utilize your first TP to get back to lane, unless you can get a proxy, because if you don't, you're going to fall behind in XP, even though you started off the lane winning. I would also recommend using your TP to the wave, so not TPing to tower like you're used to, because if you base straight away after crashing, buy your items and TP back, that takes 16 to 20 seconds, a bit more if you have to wait for your item, your HP to come back, or maybe an item or something. Let's say you only got 24 minions, not 25, and you have to wait for your longsword, that's fine. But if you TP to the wave, you're not going to lose anything, but if you TP to tower, sometimes you do. So it's important that you do that unless you know the jungler is there, or if you don't know they're there, if they don't know they're not there, then you can look to TP to tower safely. But if you crash a clean wave, TP back. Even if you don't crash the wave cleanly, you're not going to lose anything, so I always recommend using your TP in that way. Now, because of how this works, how it's hard not to lose XP unless you TP back, if you're not getting pro, it's really hard for you to find a timer to base and come back without losing any experience. So this means champions that are stronger early are more valuable because you can make your opponent base in TP in a situation that's not favorable. It takes 8 seconds to recall, you have to wait a little bit for your resources, 8 seconds to TP back, they are going to lose a lot of XP. However, if you're on the receiving end of that and you're getting punished, the best way for you to base in TP without losing anything is not allowing the tower to do all of the work. So when the wave's under your tower, do your best to one-shot it. Send your abilities into it, kill it as fast as humanly possible, instead of just last sitting when the tower shoots it, and then base and TP back. So while the travel time of the next wave is coming in, you've bought yourself a lot of time, where if you have to wait for even 5 or 10, 15 seconds for the tower to shoot the minions twice or one time before you last did it, you're going to have to base and TP after that, and you're going to lose XP. So make sure you decide, okay, I want to base after this wave, kill the wave as fast as you can, and then base and TP back if you're not getting prior, or else you're going to lose experience and be behind in that lane. Next up, we're going to be covering roaming, and I'm going to be showcasing an example from a recent solo queue game of mine in the background while we break down this topic. But one thing you really need to keep in mind is the value of roaming has increased significantly this season. The two main factors for that is, of course, the feats of strength and early game objectives like grubs being more valuable, but also the fact that it's really hard to let the wave come back into you and freeze, especially in a matchup where your opponent isn't making major mistakes. So imagine this matchup here, I'm up against an Ignite Rumble with Phase Rush. If the wave comes back towards me, wave 3 or wave 5, doesn't matter, and I try to trade onto him, it's going to break the wave and the wave will crash into him. So how can I let the wave come back into me while trading onto him without breaking the wave and have him low enough that I can freeze and kill him? It's pretty unrealistic unless he makes major mistakes, so the better game plan for me is to two-wave crash and go attack their jungler, especially if you verse champions at a really weak early game, like a Hecarim or these useless farm junglers. You can run in and beat them up. So you can see here, I find him on Raptors, take a little one, I even take the big one as well, and I'm calling in my Nunu to come. Actually, he comes by himself, and now the Hecarim is in a really tough position. I am losing a little bit of farm here, but me attacking the jungler and sitting him behind, especially when he's playing a tempo jungler, is more valuable. Now, initially, I would have gone back to top, caught my wave here, but I saw Hecarim went for golems. He's being a little bit greedy, so while my Nunu was doing red, I went and attacked him on golems here. So I denied even more golem. I waited for the little ones to come out before I queued and beat him up here, took the little Krugs while the Nunu eats his red. So you can see, it would have been really hard for me to pressure this Nunu as the wave comes in, and this type of wave control, so it's better for me just to go for a crash, two-wave crash, attack jungle, three or four-wave crash, attack jungle. It doesn't matter, it really depends on the situation. The reason I went for it this game is I wanted a two-wave crash against this Rumble, and I knew I could catch him on Raptors before the wave came in, where in the previous season, if you three-wave crash, you can attack him on the buff, but a lot of the time, especially if they got a leash early game, they can kill the buff before you get them. So if you two-wave crash and attack, you have a lot of time to catch them even on their minor camps like Raptors. Moving on to freezing, and for those of you who saw my previous wave control guide, you might remember the rule I had, which was the 4 minion gap rule for freezing. However, it's a little bit different now. Because the wave does so much damage to each other, I would recommend a 5 minion gap rule, so 5 casters or a melee 4 casters, something like that, is going to be a good amount to freeze. Don't freeze a cannon minion, as the opponents can just easily contest you and get that wave in. Unless your opponent's not there, then I guess it doesn't matter, but a 5 minion gap rule is going to be the way to go. Now, keep in mind, that's not going to permanently freeze. I'd say the max you can freeze realistically, not in training tool, against a real opponent, is going to be 3 waves, so about 90 seconds if you keep the wave there. If they're just sitting back and throwing abilities, not touching the wave, you can freeze for about 3 waves, which I think is good. You don't really want to be freezing for the whole game anyway, so that's more than enough to get a 20 CS gap against them, something like that. And as long as you're zoning them from XP as well, that's going to get you a big advantage. After that, it's going to break naturally, but if your opponent walks up and you take a trade, of course it depends on the champion, but most champions, Ambassador, Rally, Riven, doesn't matter. If you take a trade on your freeze is now going to be broken. Where before, it was a little bit more lenient, unless you just literally nuked the wave with a Nectin Q or something stupid. It was a bit lenient before where you could take a trade or two and keep the wave there. That's not going to be the case anymore. If you do take a trade that's realistically a decent size, not like a baby Fiora Q or something like that, you're not going to be able to hold that freeze for very long. So make sure when you do have that wave in that position and they do walk up trying to get it in, you go for your all-in. Because if you take a trade, get them low HP, then they're just going to let the wave come back towards them. Of course, don't all of them. If you're going to lose it, I'm just letting you know, if you are planning to freeze and kill your opponent, you don't really have a lot of opportunities to do so. Because if you take a trade, there's a high chance it's going to break the wave, depending on the champion you're playing and how much damage they do to the wave as well. And as for when to freeze, the best time, we talked about it a little bit before, is going to be after crashing wave 4 and letting the wave come back towards you. There's not too much to do the first 5 minutes of the game for a top laner, so that's going to be your best time to freeze and play for a gank or an all-in. That's going to be the best time. The next time is right after the grub play is done. So you crash in a wave, you play for grubs, it's all done, you base and come back, wave coming back to you. That's going to be a good time to freeze as well, as the next grub spawn's not going to be for a long time. Realistically, if your jungler just made a top play, he's going to be clearing down after that, so your jungler's not going to be on your side for a long time, which means you're not going to be able to play for a freeze, play to a volatile, sorry, without getting punished by the enemy jungler. So that can be a good time to freeze. So realistically, I'd say the first 4 minutes of the game is a good time to freeze, or between the 2 grub spawn. You never want to freeze when grubs is up, in my opinion. There might be some exceptions, like your jungler fully committed bottom doing dragon and we're giving them, but if you're in a position of strength, I really recommend playing for grubs on this season, getting pro, taking good trades, pinging your jungler like, come, we can play for this, really getting him involved, because that's going to be the best way to win the game. Where before, it was still a really good way to win, don't get me wrong, but freezing value was a little bit higher. Now I'd say the value of freezing has decreased, as long as you're doing it at times where there's something else to do. If you can attack the jungler and proxy, or play for grubs, that should be your play. But again, if it's in the early game, or if there's that lull state between 2 grubs, or if your jungler just hates you and doesn't want to go anywhere near top, then you can look to freeze as well. So I have a pretty good example here of utilizing freezing to gain an advantage. In this game here, I'm playing Rumble against a Wukong. First Rumble game in a while, that's why I took ulti off of Quickcast. Got to make sure you don't miss them. But my game plan here, Wukong wins level 1. He's got Conquer, he's got Ignite. Of course, he can beat my head in if he wants. My goal is to take short trades and all in him on the bounce back and try to freeze the wave if I can. Now, as soon as I saw my Lee Sin starting Raptors, I also kept in mind that means he's going to be doing Raptors red golems. So I can use him for a gank if it looks good. So we can see, I wanted the bush just in case he took a big trade and walked back in there. I wanted the minions to hit him, and I'm chilling back just picking up minions with my E. I want to take a trade around level 2 so that I can trim the wave at the same time as hitting him with my Q. But if I took a level 1 trade now, it wouldn't go too well for me. So I'll skip it a little bit. He's level 2 right now, so I'm waiting for that last minion to die, get level 2 myself, and then I walk up. I want to trade onto him and cook the wave at the same time because of my jungler's positioning, where if my jungler was fully going bottom and the jungler was going top, I probably wouldn't make it this volatile. But you can see now, the wave is going to be in a position where he can't crash it. He doesn't know the new wave control, he didn't try the 2-wave crash, and I'm making it hard for him. The good thing about this is wave 2 and wave 3 is normal waves, so it's a lot easier to freeze the wave outside of your tower early game, even if your opponent gets pushed, as long as you play the trades well. So we can see he's low HP, I've got the wave trimmed, it's in a really uncomfortable position for him, even to crash a 1v1. But because I pinged my jungler, and I'll go back to it, you'll see, my jungler initially, watch his body language, was moving down to walls after golems, but because I pinged him, I gave him an opportunity to come top. In lower brackets, you might need to ping 2 or 3 times, but make sure you give your jungler warning in advance before they've moved on to the next camp. And that's exactly what I did here, trimming the wave, poking him at the same time, and now Lee Sin has arrived, and we're able to pick up a kill. So even if Lee Sin didn't come here, you can see my wave's in a good position. It would have been quite hard for him to crash that wave if I trimmed it one more time. We got level 3, and we can see as well, I trimmed the wave a little bit, and then look to base and TP. So normally on the previous season, you could base and walk back on your freeze, but on this season, I still recommend TPing, as you're going to lose a lot. I'm pretty sure I even lost a cannon minion, because the wave does so much damage to each other. But now I'm basing back, I've got a freeze, again not a permanent freeze, as it's not 5 minions of advantage, but enough to keep the wave here a long enough time to trade onto him. So I'm going to take a trade here, but remember what we talked about freezing, where if you take a trade, it is going to break your freeze. My freeze is already broken already, so I know I have to take my all-in now before he just chills and let the wave come back towards him. So that's exactly what I do here. You can see I'm forcing onto him as he's trying to trim the wave, kiting him a little bit, but I know I'm level 4 versus 3. If I chill now on this timer, he's going to get level 4 and let the wave come in, so I all in him on this opportunity here. So a few things there. TPing back to lane, really crucial, even if you crash a wave, even if you have a freeze, you just lose way too much XP. You can see he didn't have TP, so he didn't TP back to lane. He was down so much XP. I was level 4 versus 3 with a significant advantage. It's really hard for him to play the game. And if you don't take your all-in timer on your freeze and you do take a trade, you're not going to be able to hold your freeze for a long time at all. Moving on to proxying. I'm not going to spend too much time in this section. It's not really that different to last season, the execution and things like that, but I do want to be going through the differences. So proxying value has increased due to the minions doing so much damage to each other that if you don't proxy before your recall, you're not going to be able to walk back to lane without losing XP. That doesn't mean you should try to force a proxy every single time no matter what on every champion. Sometimes you do just have to base and lose XP, and that's reality. But if you are playing a champion that can proxy and you feel confident, definitely good to go for. So I have students ask me, when should I proxy? And I'll say the best times to do it is either when, of course, the jungler is bot side, the enemy jungler, you see where he is doing dragon or something, that's going to be the easiest. But don't tunnel on that. Don't tunnel on, oh, I see the jungler, I can do it, I don't see him, I can't. It's all about the threat. The way you can proxy if you don't see your jungler really depends on the threat that the top jungler will have against you. So if you're versing, let's say, a Kale top with a Nidalee, something stupid, they're probably not going to be able to kill you. But if you're versing a Relia Rek'Sai and you try to proxy, and you don't know what the Rek'Sai is, really high chance you die there. So really think about the threat that the top jungle will have onto you. Think, if the jungle pops up here, am I going to die? Before you go for the proxy. But the best time to do it generally is after you crash your wave very cleanly. So the wave before you proxy, make sure you get that in clean. I don't recommend proxying a cannon minion early on. So if you can cleanly crash a cannon and then walk past them through the tower or walk around the back if you've got time, that's going to be good. Kill that wave as fast as you can and then get your high tempo recall off. So I have an example here of a game where I proxied quite often. In this game I'm playing up against a Gragas top and Bel'Veth jungle. Now keep in mind at this point, the Bel'Veth did just die and his golems are up and Void Grubs are up. He could be coming straight top, but again, it's not about the jungler being bottom and not being able to gank you, it's about the threat that they have on you. Gragas and Bel'Veth cannot kill me. I have Ghost, I have ulti, there's no way they can fight me out, and worst case scenario, I could go 1-for-1 or run away, so it's a good timer for me to proxy, especially in this lane up against a Gragas. I already have an advantage. I don't want to try to freeze against a Gragas, he's just going to queue. the wave and phase rush away if I try to stop him. So it's better for me to proxy and look for attack around the map. So I go for a proxy, I fog down, no play to make, so I go back top here, trim this wave, and again, I'm going to be looking for a play every time. I want to attack Belveth on chickens, I want to attack the Syndra if she plays aggressive, and you'll see that's exactly what happens. I'm camping here, waiting for Belveth to arrive, he ganks mid, so I just run through the tower and counter gank it. So I would say the biggest benefit to proxying would be avoiding the matchups you don't want to play, but also it's a lot more impactful as a top laner to proxy and attack jungle, attack mid. You can see that's exactly what I was looking to do, and especially in a matchup versus a Gragas or a Tarm, something like that, those are going to be the best games for it. Moving on to cheater recall. Now, cheater recalling is very different to last season, but it's not dead. It's definitely still a good strategy. The times where you want to do it is going to be after you do the 4-wave crash that we talked about, so wave 2 into wave 4 crash into cheater, or there are going to be a lot of situations you might find yourself in. If you're playing a really volatile matchup, your opponent's staunching you, that you still need to do a wave 3 crash into a cheater. So the timings where you do want to do that is if you crash wave 2, wave 3 is coming in, your opponent contests you, you fight them, and you do damage to the wave. In that case, you probably won't have time to crash wave 3 and 4 together. Wave 3 might go too quickly. So like one of our general rules that we talk about, it's always best to crash the wave cleanly if you can. So get that wave 3 in as fast as you can. And then if you're in the resources where you feel like, okay, the cannon wave's going to come back, and he can probably all-in me on his level 3, so imagining you're versing a champ like Irelia or a Rumble or a Darius and they get level 3 with the wave coming back and you feel a little bit low, you feel like you can't contest them on wave 4, in that case you can just cheat a recall. Based on wave 3 crash, TP back, you won't lose anything. As long as you TP back, then you're going to be full HP with the item and it's going to be really hard for them to recall. Just making sure we're following our rule for cheater recalling. You don't cheater recall just for items. You cheater recall for items and resources. Make the lane really volatile. Get really low. Get both of you low if you're low HP, low mana, and you basically come back with one ruby or one sword. That's going to be the best way to use it. But if you just base in TP because you crash the wave and you don't know what to do, you just want to buy a long sword or something like that, that's not going to be the best use of your TP. Better to make it volatile, make it scrappy, crash the wave, and come back for resources and the item advantage. Now here I have an example of a cheater recall, and I wanted to showcase this one because it's very, very messy, and a lot different than how you would cheater after wave 3 on the previous season, where if I showcase the game where I crash wave 2, crash wave 4, and just based in TP'd back, it's pretty self-explanatory, it's very clean, and there's not really many variables there, but in this game here, I had to go for a wave 3 cheater, and I'll showcase why. So in this game, my initial game plan was to crash wave 2, let it come back, but this GP was posturing quite aggressive, you can see even hit me here, getting barrels down, and my wave clear is not the best early game, so I had to go adapt into a wave 3 crash. So I'm taking trades every time my W is up, making it volatile of course, but you can see with the wave in the center like this, and he's done a lot of damage to it, it's really hard for me to go for a 2-wave crash in this game. So I'm cutting out his barrel there, and I realize wave 3 is almost arrived, so I'm going to be looking to one-shot wave 3 as it comes in, but just take trades onto him when I can. So I'll skip ahead a little bit. You can see here, I'm waiting to posture him, trying to bait out his barrel. Good little movements there. Dodge backwards here onto the barrel, get it. This was a misclick, by the way, the tower shot. Don't try that at home. But that's why I had to adapt here. So the trade didn't go well for me, whatever reason that might be. If you're crazy and fly into the tower, or if you just take a bad trade. If you crash wave 3 cleanly like this, and you base and TP back, it's not a problem. I've got 400 gold. I missed 4 out of the 18 CS that's available in the early game. So I have enough for a longsword and a potion, even though I missed CS. So I could base and TP back straight away. Now you can see here, he tried to match my recall. He didn't want to be stuck in lane on this low HP, but because he had to waste time killing the wave under his tower, I've got time to stop his base. So double Q, W2 blocked the shot, and now I'm one-shotting this wave quickly, because I want him to base and lose as much as possible, which means he has to stay, and diving is the most pressuring thing you can do, which is why I went for a dive on this timer. Now I didn't execute well, we didn't get the dive off, which is why it was a messy one, but you can see the idea behind the 3-wave crash was sound, where I crashed wave 3, and because the trades didn't go well for me, if I stayed, I wouldn't be healthy enough to pressure him, and I might have even been pressured myself. So basing and TPing back put me in this position where he's in an uncomfortable spot, where if he did base, he would lose a lot of CS. Moving on to the cannon waves, and the only thing you really need to know, due to wave 4 being a cannon, all the other cannon waves spawn 30 seconds later than normal. So I'm going to be putting all the timings up on the screen where the important cannons spawn, and one thing to keep in mind is the timing in which you get level 6 has not changed, where if you stay in lane for a long time, and you get every single bit of XP, you're going to get the level 6 timer on the 5-minute normal wave. The 6-minute cannon, I mean the wave 4 cannon doesn't change anything, so the 5-minute regular wave is going to be a timer where you get level 6, so make sure you use that one well. But other than that, the main time, I'd say the main purpose of learning the cannon minion waves, other than if you're playing it on a team or clash with the boys, is syncing your dives on it. So if you're planning to dive and you don't really know which time the cannon wave is going to come out, memorizing timers can help with that. You don't really need to know all of them, they spawn every 90 seconds, so if you remember one or two of them, it can be quite easy to figure out in the game. But this is the timer of where, not when they spawn, the timer in which they arrive in your lane. So if you want to be diving somebody and it's around 4 minutes and doing well, you should wait until 4 minute 30, dive them on the cannon wave. Or if you want to proc demolish, you want to be proccing your demolish on the cannon wave. So the best way to go for a demolish proc or a tower dive is stacking the wave before cannon. So let's say the 5:30 normal wave with the 6-minute cannon wave, stacking that together, and then going for your demolish proc or going for your dive, something like that. That's going to be the best way you can utilize the new cannon wave timers. It also means if you know the cannon timers, if you proxy the wave before cannon, that's going to be the highest tempo recall you can possibly make. Because not only do they have to kill the wave that comes in, the normal wave, they have to kill the cannon wave as well before they can make any type of wave crash under your tower. So if you proxy, let's say the 5:30 normal wave, then they have to kill that wave and the cannon. You've got a huge timer where you can roam down to Dragon or gank bot and TP top. Something like that. You can be really creative with it. I'd say for the average player, it's not going to matter as much, but for high ranked players or players playing in teams, memorizing the cannon timers can be very crucial for you. Alright team, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions at all about the extra wave control stuff that I might have missed out on, or just things you want to see in the season, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.